which has been conducted from the Council chamber and remotely through Microsoft Teams. Can I ask you to ensure that your microphones are off, please? The meeting is now being recorded and will be made available on the Comhairle's website following this meeting. I am ruling item 3 as urgent to allow the board to consider the matter prior to the next meeting of the board. Now, I'm asking for approval for the minute of the meeting of the 31st of January 2024. Approval? Yes. Yes. Approved. Declaration of interest now. Members are asked to declare any interest they have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members expressed why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Can you please now do so by pressing your microphone on or remotely through Teams by using the raise hand function if there are any declarations of interest? Done. Okay. I would now welcome Chief Inspector Jane Mackenzie to this meeting and invite Chief Inspector to take us through the police performance report, please.
So you have the report there, which was provided in advance. I'll just provide a summary of some of the information in the areas of concern that I know exist amongst members. So since our last report in November, which was presented by Superintendent Ross, demand has continued and officers remain very busy. I do appreciate that officer numbers and visibility continue to be a concern for members and our communities. I can confirm that after doing some research, we do have the same number of officers that we had 10 years ago, other than the 2 Tarbert posts which were lost in 2016. And we do remain over our allocated number of officers. We have had an officer transfer into US this month and have another officer transferring to Stornoway later this summer. We have advertised the campus officer post and have secured external funding for a further additional post to support local policing and the prevention intervention strategy, which I can provide more information on at the next meeting. I'm aware that Harris has been a concern and lack of visibility in Harris. That has now been given more focus, and Councillor Finnegan's been given an update in relation to that. We did undertake an online recruitment event at the end of February. There was good attendance at that event, and it was facilitated by 2 local officers as well as recruitment. But this hasn't materialised into any local applications. We do have the active special constables who are supporting local policing, and we continue to attend careers events that are run locally to try and encourage local recruits. We did undertake a work experience programme which was well received and publicised. It was well received by those who attended it, and we hope that these will develop into applications in the future. Whilst our numbers may have remained the same, it's well known that there have been societal changes and legislation changes that have placed increasing demands on officers, and one of the upcoming demands that we will have are short-term licence enforcement. So I have spoken to Mr. Fraser, who will be presenting later, in relation to a plan in relation for that. Also, you may have seen in the media, return of trials to Stornoway Lochmaddy has gained some media interest, and that could present a potential challenge, particularly in the Southern Isles, as we go forward, but we'll deal with these as they arise. I note the comments from the board members in relation to the annual policing plan, particularly in relation to our response to mental health. We will continue to respond where there is an immediate risk of harm. However, it should be noted that the average call results in a minimum of 4 hours of officers' dedicated time. That's for a minimum of 2 officers. That's 4 hours where they aren't providing a service or visibility elsewhere. We are working with partners in the NHS in relation to updating their psychiatric emergency plan, and the Western Isles Partnership have introduced a new service called Distress Brief Intervention to try and alleviate some of the pressures on officers and partners in relation to mental health crises. This is a service where people in crisis can be referred for mental health support, which they will receive within 24 hours, with a plan then put in place for support to up to an additional 14 days. There's been 2 local practitioners recruited as part of that service, so that there will be the capability for face-to-face input with these individuals. This has been rolled out to police officers initially, and roll out to other services ongoing. In relation to voluntary redundancy and early retirement for staff members, I'm pleased to report this hasn't affected the Western Isles. We had nobody who wanted to apply for that, and staffing levels remain the same. Forensic training has been delivered to a number of officers across the Western Isles, which gives additional skills relative to this and the ability to undertake forensic examination at scenes promptly in approved circumstances where this may not otherwise be available. The drug wipe training initiative is ongoing. It's scheduled to roll out initially in Shetland this autumn, with other islands to follow. It's worthy of note that we've had 3 drug drivers detected through drug wipes since the beginning of May. These were undertaken by a road policing officer who was over to attend court and went out and did some proactive activity whilst he was here, with a further practice stop within the last week, within the last 5 days, in relation to suspected drug and drink driving. We do continue to work to tackle drugs in our community. Whilst possession cases have reduced, you'll see from the report, we had an increase in supply cases for the reporting period. It's also worthy of note that many of the possession cases recorded don't materialise into convictions or contribute to recovery of dealing quantities, and tackling the dealers whom we should be targeting. Work is ongoing in this area at an operational level to try and change those figures and improve results. Further to this, we've introduced a partners intelligence portal. This allows the anonymous sharing of information by public and third sector organisations. Training has been undertaken with a number of practitioners and will continue to roll this out. I would still encourage members, their constituents and our communities to share information and knowledge they have in relation to drug misuse within our communities to allow us to tackle the issue. I'm aware that youth antisocial behaviour continues to be a concern to communities, particularly around Stornoway. Work is ongoing in this regard with a focus on visibility, patrols, foot and mobile patrols. We did carry out a recent survey of the affected areas, and an action plan has been devised on the back of that, with an updated newsletter going out to all residents. I've undertaken patrols in these areas myself and engaged with people in the community, whilst in a number of engagement events in recent weeks around Stornoway, which I'm happy to repeat elsewhere should elected members or community councils request it. The repeated complaints at these events were speeding, hence our focus on this and antisocial behaviour. I do continue to chair the Youth Justice Group to drive and oversee the matter and the partnership response in this regard. We continue to see very low numbers of youth offending, a reduction in the number of reports received in relation to this. On a positive note, to try and provide some support to our young people, Nicholson Institute have started a Pathways mentoring programme. They've been looking to recruit approximately 30 volunteers for this, in addition to the Mentorship and Violence Prevention Scheme, which is being run by pupils within the school. And that will hopefully support the work that's ongoing in relation to some of the prevention interventions around youth offending. Looking forward to the summer, we've got Hebkelt and Eilean festivals coming up, so planning and staffing is in place for these. And it'll be similar to previous years where the focus is on a community policing response and engagement. I'm happy to take any questions any members may have in relation to the report provided or comments made.
Councillor McCormack.
Chairman, I'm not a member of your committee. I just wondered if I might raise a couple of matters with the Chief Inspector about traffic matters in the town centre of Stornoway. Specifically, I refer to what we call a pedestrian precinct. And I must say that in recent months, I've been very concerned that there was going to be a serious accident in there. It is just now being used as a thoroughfare by all sorts of people travelling in and out. They don't even pay attention to the directions of travel. They just travel in and out as they wish. They're not really paying much attention to the pedestrians who are in the area either. And I'm very, very concerned that there might be an accident in that area, and I would want to try and avoid that happening if we possibly could. I've had occasion, because I've been working with the Historical Society, and I've been therefore on the premises, if you like, for a significant period of time, number of hours, and I have been very troubled by the vehicles that have come in. I mean, I've seen huge articulated vehicles with a trailer behind them coming into that area there. And I've seen traffic regularly going against the direction of traffic flow that they should be taking in that area. And I must admit, it concerns me greatly that somebody's going to be knocked down and badly injured. And I understand, from briefings I've had before, that you have an issue with staffing. So we must find some way of making that a safe place for pedestrians to walk. It is indeed intended to be a pedestrian precinct between certain hours of the day. The other thing I would like to mention, Chair, if you allow me so to do, there was a committee in the early days of my time on this council, which was called the Traffic Management Committee in Stornoway. And we looked at a variety of matters, and we in fact were the ones who created the pedestrian precinct in the first place all these years ago. And we also expressed concerns about traffic using Kenneth Street, for example. Kenneth Street is not a very wide street, and it's invariably parked almost completely, so it's really a single track and single direction street. And that's okay up to a point, but at the just before the junction with Church Street, there is an area there which is blocked by traffic cones almost permanently. And the purpose of that is to allow a significantly sized HGV to park there and unload. At the time when that committee was in operation, we had made an arrangement whereby HGVs would not come in to Stornoway Town Centre, and they do not now come into the pedestrian precinct. At least I haven't seen one recently. I don't think, and a number of members of the public have said to me, especially in recent days, that huge articulated lorry should not be parking there on a regular basis to unload. The idea was that these big lorries would go to their depot somewhere out with the town centre and offload into smaller vehicles, and the smaller vehicles would then come and deliver to the town centre spaces. That is certainly what we discussed in the committee at that time, and I just wonder whether we shouldn't be reviewing the situation. Again, having an articulated lorry of that size in that very narrow street, I just have a fear, that something bad is going to happen, and I'm not very comfortable with that. And quite a number of members of the public have mentioned it to me, especially if I happen to be walking on Kenneth Street. They say, why don't you do something about this situation? And so I bring it to your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Do you speak there?
So I take comments on board. I can't speak to what was agreed previously at the Traffic Management Committee because I wasn't part of that and have no knowledge of it. What I will say is that we have an operational road safety group which is attended by members of the Roads Department as well as police, fire service and a number of others, and I will take the comments to that committee to have a look at. I probably think personally that the pedestrian precinct needs some traffic calming measures or something to prevent vehicles going down there, because the only time it seems that vehicles seem to stop is when there's an officer there, and we obviously can't staff that every day. So we will take that back and look at that. I wasn't aware about no HGVs in Kenneth Street. Again, that's something we can look at with the operator of these vehicles. We have been trying to provide more of a focus down in the town on work with foot patrols when we have shift crossovers and have more allow that to happen. So that has been happening. There have been tickets issued in relation to parking and other offences, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. And am I right in saying that unless officers see vehicles entering the pedestrian precinct, that the law does not allow them to charge the drivers of these vehicles. So you're limited somewhat.
Yes, that's correct. So the officers have to see them driving through before they can issue tickets.
Yeah.
And quite often by the time they get there, there's vehicles parked and unattended.
Any other questions for the Chief Inspector? Beg your pardon.
Thanks very much, Chair. Funnily enough, I was going to mention Kenneth Street because this morning I had occasion to be on the corner of Kenneth Street and Church Street, and I was going towards my car, and I had to walk in the middle of the road because not only was the big lorry parked right beside the pavement, but the traffic cones actually took up the pavement, so no pedestrians could walk on the pavement, and there were elderly people about, apart from myself, who had to go out onto the road. And there was also a lot of people off a cruise boat. So the road was actually, Kevin Street was really busy at that time. And I wasn't aware of the restriction on the big lorries being on Kenneth Street. That makes absolute sense. But even were they to be delivering not during these hours but earlier, I know that would probably bring other annoyance to the residents, but this was at 9:30, 10:15, and people going about their business were having to walk in the middle of the road. And as Councillor McCormick says, it's a narrow road at the best of times. That wasn't my question. I was just kind of agreeing. I wanted to ask, a couple of councillors spoke to me yesterday about the possibility of community speed watch schemes, which apparently training is offered. They have to be in threes, and I wasn't aware of the scheme, but two councillors had asked me to ask about that.
Thank you. I'm not aware of that scheme, but happy to look into it. You will see from the report there are a significant number of speeding tickets issued, and road traffic fixed penalties issued in relation to that, but absolutely happy if there's people that would like to be trained in a scheme where they can operate in their own communities, then absolutely I'll take that away and have a look.
Yep. Councillor MacDonald.
Can I add on to Kenneth Street, Keith Street, which is desperate for parking on both sides of the street. It's a long, long street, and practically the whole length of the street has double parking. And I don't know how a refuse vehicle or anything large could progress along that without scraping the sides of the car. Perhaps you could take that up with the council. Another thing is, of course, speeding, especially along Behead and Madison Road. Just seems to be, once they know the road is clear and perhaps there's no police cars in the vicinity, they thunder up at 60, 70 miles an hour, making a huge racket as well. And it distresses dogs and children, let's put it that way, and elderly people. And perhaps I could include myself with that.
Of the community engagement events was around speeding around various areas of the Stormy. So I have actually emailed them in relation to most of them, but I will include Bayhead and Mathson. Bayhead was in that, but I'll include Mathson Road in that.
Thank you. Councillor McSween.
Thank you. Better just mention the rural areas because I can't let the towny councillors ask all the questions today. I just want to highlight Ballintrusal as an area that gets raised with me quite often. Now, we always get, I think there's a general level of acceptance that there's going to be some speeding, and that enforcement is attempted and it's not always possible. But I just want to highlight a couple of examples that have been raised with me in Ballintrusal where it's not just the speeding, but the overtaking. Doing, what a car might be doing 50 mile an hour and then it's going to get overtaken doing 60, 70, 80 mile an hour. And you've got two cars side by side, both speeding in the same direction. It's a particularly dangerous stretch within our ward. So I just wanted to highlight that while I've got the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McSween.
Ballintrusal is an area that does get a lot of focus, and I'm happy to share the figures with Councillor McSween in relation to the number of fixed penalties issued, but there's always offences there detected.
Thank you, Chief Inspector. Councillor McInnes.
Yeah, I'm not a member of your committee, but looking at, this council's been in place for a couple of years, and there is a committee that was formed with regards to issuing your permits. As the question I have is, how many permits have been issued in the last 2 years for access to Point Street? And are the vehicles that are displaying permits have been issued many years ago? Are they transferring them from the vehicles they had then, or what? Or what is the procedure for the issuing of new permits for that area? Because as far as I'm aware, I'm a member of that committee, but I haven't seen any correspondence in 2 years with regards to it. Probably Derek will know what the answer to that is.
The permit subcommittee hasn't met since November 2021. It is through the Stornoway Permits subcommittee, of which Councillor McCormack was previous chair, that issued permits to anyone wishing to access the town centre on a regular basis.
I note in Inverness last week a very efficient system where barriers were electronically activated for permit holders. They would lower and allow vehicles into the pedestrian precinct and then immediately rise up again. I presume that it's some form of control in the vehicle concerned that allowed them to do that, but it prevented almost all vehicles, and certainly no unauthorized vehicles were allowed into the precinct. Very effective. There will, of course, be a financial cost to it. Any other questions? Councillor McCormack.
Sorry, this is very cheeky of me, but I was just thinking, when you mentioned financial cost, and we have spoken about these type of rising barriers in the past, and we've always been told we can't have them because we can't afford them. Is it at all a practical thing to do whilst we are trying to find the money to just place a barrier there? I would say a wooden barrier there, just at the appropriate times, and then store that barrier somewhere when the precinct is open. I mean, just on a temporary basis until such time. It's just, my concern is that there's going to be a serious accident and that somebody's going to be badly hurt. Probably an elderly person, like my councillor colleague.
Get back to you then.
Just following on from what Councillor McCormack was saying, we did get a presentation on Stornoway going into a one-way system, and I understood, who gave the presentation? Was it someone from High Trans or? Yeah, so there was funding available, in the near future on shifting to a one-way system whereby you come in at the health board offices and then out at Bay Head. And clearly one of the things we were talking about at that particular time was parking. And there's supposed to be a pay and display in the centre of Stornoway, but whether many use it or paid, I have no idea. And the suggestion was made then as part of the overall development of traffic in Stornoway that there would be a barrier to those, and similar to what happens at the airport, you pay as you go in, and then the barrier lifts as you come out. So I don't know what stage that's at, but certainly the indication was it's going to happen, and all that we're discussing today should be included in the mix for whatever the funding is for making sure that we have an improvement on the way traffic is managed in the town.
I think the decision was taken that there would be no enforcement of non-compliance with fee paying at the car park in Stornoway Town Centre, because it would cost more to employ someone to enforce that than the actual machines were taking in revenue.
Yeah, yes, that was employing a traffic warden. Moving forward.
Need to be your microphone.
That was with replacing the traffic warden that we
Yes.
used to have and employing the services of our traffic warden, because the cost implications were significant, because the police shared costs previously and used the police services there. It was a kind of a unique operation that was there with Police Scotland. And when the traffic warden that was there retired, a new approach had to be done. Yeah. So the cost implications for that didn't merit another traffic warden. No. But it was looking at a system like the airport. We all saw what the airport was like prior to, a barrier and you're having to pay for parking there. You just turn up and people were leaving their cars there for 3 weeks when they were offshore. You couldn't get a parking space in there.
That's right.
A simple barrier sorted all that out.
Yes.
So I'm sure a simple barrier may cost a lot, but will pay for itself for the longer term and improve traffic management.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if I'm right in saying this, there are no traffic wardens in Scotland now, is that right? Yes. There's no such thing in Scotland now as traffic wardens.
So yes, we had the last traffic warden in Scotland. Other areas, so mainland, have predominantly decriminalised parking, and it's dealt with by parking attendants, civilian parking attendants. The islands haven't decriminalised for the reasons you've alluded to. It's the cost of trying to create a new system in relation to processing of parking tickets, deemed to be would cost more money than the tickets would take it. However, I was given information a number of months ago that the local authority were looking at putting something in place for the car parks, and I thought that was going to be prior to summer, but again, it's a question for roads.
Thank you. Okay. No further questions. Do members agree to note the report? Thank you. Okay, we'll now ask, thank you very much, Chief Inspector Mackenzie. And now we're asking for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service performance against the Fire and Rescue Plan for the Western Isles and a report by Area Commander Scott Gibson.
Good afternoon, Convener and elected members, and thanks for your time today. Things have been progressing well over the reporting period within the Western Isles. So what I'll do, or propose to do, is cover some of the areas of ongoing work which have been ongoing over that reporting period before handing over to Group Commander Campbell for some local context from the area. We do have a further item on the agenda, so I won't talk in depth at the moment about our Strategic Service Review Programme and the national discussion around that. We'll leave that until the appropriate time on the agenda. The next area that's progressing, that we've been progressing over the last few months, is our unwanted fire alarm system changes that we implemented. It's just almost a year ago now. So members will be aware of the changes that were implemented in July last year regarding our attendance at these types of incidents and the aim of reducing the amount of road risk that they give us and providing us and our staff more time and resources for other activities by not attending these in regard to training and community engagement. So as I said, we're nearly a year into that process now. We haven't produced any official statistics yet to show the impact of this, but I do propose to provide these in due course and give the committee an overview of what the outcome of that policy change has been. What I can say at the moment is that we've certainly seen a huge reduction in the numbers which is a positive for us. And as I said, with the road risk and the time it allows us to do other activities is a real positive. So that's our unwanted fire alarm signals. Probably just out with the reporting period, but because of the period, the length of the period we're covering, I'll just mention the recruitment across Western Isles at the moment. We've been really proactive in this area over the last few months, and we've got really positive numbers across the whole of the Western Isles, especially at some of our stations where we've been struggling in the past with numbers, which has been really positive for me and a real credit to the team on the Western Isles with the work that they've been putting in to make that happen. So I would just like to thank them for their efforts around that. We'll have the opportunity here. And this obviously has a massive impact on the local communities and making them safer and providing that emergency response cover across the whole of the Western Isles. One other area of work that I've been ongoing over the past few months is looking at some innovative solutions around pathways for full-time employment for staff across the 3 islands that I look after. So we've been fortunate enough to start a pilot on Shetland and Orkney at the moment with introducing a rural full-time crew command post, which comes from our cadre of on-call firefighters, and they can then move into a whole-time employment opportunity on the island. And I will be looking to, once the pilot's complete and the evaluation's done, I will be looking to do similar in the Western Isles and start to introduce that full-time employment pathway for our staff in the area. And then finally, for me, from an overview perspective, is the merge that we've recently had of our Prevention, Protection and Preparedness department. So we used to run that individually on the 3 islands, across the 3 islands, and it was limited with the amount of resources that we had. So what we've just put in place is we've done a merger with Highland. So we've now got a Prevention, Protection and Preparedness department across Highland and Wales. And what that does for me and for the area is it gives us better access to resources and a lot more support to give a provision for local engagements and local fire safety enforcement across the area. So that's another real positive that I just wanted to highlight to the committee. Other than that, that's all from a kind of wider perspective. So what I'll do is go on the report itself. From my perspective, looking through the report, very low numbers, which is a positive. No real increases and no real areas of concern from myself for the area. And yeah, I'll just hand over to Group Commander Campbell to provide some local context. Thank you.
Yep, thanks to the area commander for his comments there. Obviously, I'll cover the local context of the report and highlight, I think I do this every time, is obviously because of the low numbers and the operational response, any slight increase or decrease can always show on a graph as being quite stark. But when you're dealing with such low numbers, it can show quite a change, whether that's for the positive or negative. So to pick out a few elements within it, priority 1, which is pages 8 to 10 of the report, within this recording period of 6 months, we have 6 accidental dwelling fires, which is down in the 3-year average, and the majority of these were low severity, as we would call them, requiring little or no intervention from the service. We also had no fatalities and no casualties in that period of time as well, which is obviously a positive for us. Within that, we did have 8 road traffic collisions, which is slightly above the same recording period of last year, but it's actually down in our 5-year average as well. And within the report, it also states we had 1 road traffic collision related fatality as well, and a slight increase in injuries. However, the increase in injuries, the majority of them were contained within 1 road traffic collision. So moving on to priority 2, which is page 11 of the report. So this is fire safety enforcement, non-domestic fire safety element. We undertook 29 fire safety enforcement audits in this recording period, and we've got 2 action plans that are outstanding. And within the same period, with 3 non-domestic building fires, which is again is a number that's down on the same recording period in previous years. Under priority 3 on page 12, this is kind of further to the area commander's comments about UFAS. We dealt with 11 unwanted fire alarm signals during the 6-month period, which is significantly down on the 3-year figure, but that's obviously related to the change in the UFAS policy that we've got. We'll continue to work on these numbers as well to drive them down even further where we can, where we can do it safely. Under priority 4, operational resilience and preparedness, which is page 13, again touched on by the area commander. Recruitment is the biggest element, recruitment and retention for us currently. So in the 2-year period, we've had 37 new starts within the Western Isles. It's figures that I think any area per head of population in Scotland would be quite jealous of, to be honest. So the team that worked on that have done a fantastic job, and again, to pass on my thanks as well as area commanders for the work they've done on that. And this undoubtedly helps us with our figures as far as availability goes across the island groups. Our firefighters also continue training all aspects of the role. We've currently undergoing animal rescue training, which falls within this recording period for the Stornoway area. We hope to get that live in the next few months. We've also increased our capabilities as far as safe working at height goes. So we've changed our response to that and increased our level of response within this period. We continue to have some joint mobilising. I covered joint mobilising, I think, in the last scrutiny, explained the background to it. With very limited numbers, I'm pleased to say very limited numbers in this recorded period. And we'll continue to try not to use joint mobilising when we can, because obviously the lower numbers of that indicates that we're actually responding with the appropriate appliances at the initial call. So I'm glad to see that numbers are slowly coming down, but also glad to see we've got a policy in place for joint mobilising now as well. The only number on the last page there that with the availability, we've got a couple of stations that are percentage availability is probably lower than I'm overly comfortable with. So Valtos is one of them. Again, we're driving recruitment forward in Valtos. There's been a change of personnel in there and it's certainly improving. So it's a picture I hope to see an improvement on the next recording period. And the other one is Benbecula. We've had a ongoing problem there with managing to get additional drivers. Again, we're working on that. We changed our pathway, as we call it, to bring in new drivers into after the concerns were shown and the concerns we had locally on the driver numbers. So we've been able to bring in people that are still in development and put them through the pathway, which has been a positive, but it obviously takes a bit of time to train somebody up to be a driver of a blue light appliance. So we're still working towards that, and at the end of that will show us a change in that availability number for Benbecula's first appliance. For the second one, it's the ongoing recruitment that we're currently looking to basically leaflet drop everybody in the area to let them know that we have got space, we've got availability in all the stations in that area, and we are actively recruiting. So we'll continue with that drive in the US Benbecula Barra area, as well as Lewis and Harris. So that pretty much concludes my part of the report. If there are any questions.
Very impressive, the figures. Thanks very much, Group Commander Campbell. Have any questions on the floor? No? Okay. We'll go on to item 5 then, and it's the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service consultation, shaping our future service. This is a report by Area Commander Scott Gibson again, and Group Commander Dougie Campbell. Thank you.
Thanks again, convener, and thanks for giving us the time to talk to this document and this consultation. So it's about the thought would take the opportunity to talk to the committee about our consultation around shaping the future service, the future of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. I believe as elected members and members of the council family that my colleague Dougie circulated information and links to the survey, and with the assistance of partners in the council, police, NHS and other areas, we've been able to reach out to a large proportion of the Western Isles residents employed by these organisations, and we've also communicated using national press and social media. Engagement sessions have already taken place right across the areas or are planned in with partnership boards, community councils, and additional engagements have already happened or are planned at community fire stations and pop-up events in areas where there's quite a big footfall in the local areas. So for the purposes of bringing to the formal attention of this group, I've prepared a summary of the main points. So this is the first stage of our engagement with staff, communities, trade unions, partners, elected representatives and people across Scotland. We will be running events and speaking to communities right through until the end of this month to find out what it is you want and what you need from your fire and rescue service. The role of a firefighter itself has evolved over time, and we want to build on this success to be a modern fire and rescue service that's ready for the challenges of Scotland's future. This is why we're developing our Strategic Service Review programme to look at how we deliver our services to become that modern service that this country needs. Just some statistics around it. So in the last 20 years across Scotland, we've seen a reduction in all types of fires by over 50%, and almost 50% reduction in house fires. And there's numerous reasons for that, be it better protection, be it better insulation. There's loads of aspects around that. We've seen over 50% reduction in other types of building fires. However, we've seen an increase in outdoor fires by around about 5%, which we class as being wildfires in that type of incident. And other non-fire type incidents have increased by over 80%, hence why we're going through this process and why there is a real need to modernise our service and look at the types of incidents that we're now predominantly turning out to across the whole of the country. Our communities are changing too, that I'm sure everyone's more than aware of, with more people living longer at home. Some of those being vulnerable and requiring additional support. So we need to be able to adapt to meet the needs of those people and those groups of people. And we know that we can do more to keep Scotland safe. So as a service, we feel that there's other areas that we can do as a service to help and maybe reduce the burden in other areas of the country across the public sector. So we want to focus on prevention and reduce demand on us and other public services. Some of the current challenges that we're facing at the moment is our increased activity, as I mentioned, in wildfire and in the other non-fire type incidents, predominantly flooding. You'll have probably read in the media or be well aware of our capital backlog now, which is in the region of between 60 and 80 million pounds. We've got 14 stations currently across station, thankfully none within the Western Isles area that are what we class as RAC, so the reinforced concrete, and many stations still without suitable dignified facilities or basic essentials. So there's investment required, also required in tackling firefighter contaminants. And again, you may have heard in the media, read in the press around the mortality rates for those that join the fire service. And the mortality rate is 1.6 more from cancers than that of the general public because of that contamination, which is something that we need to be looking at and doing something about as a service. And then there's also probably the biggest area that we've got not concerns, that's the wrong word, but the biggest area that we are working on across the Western Isles is the recruitment and retention of on-call staff, which covers the majority of the landmass in Scotland, and we heavily rely on that on-call service. So we need to be able to look at how we work with that and how we do that and how we fund that. So some of the changes that we could make in developing the firefighting role, so more prevention work, as I mentioned, to support communities, additional support for vulnerable areas of our communities, additional support for our partners in regard to emergencies. However, some of this will require investment and obviously agreement with our representative bodies. Where appropriate, we would look to change the location of our resources. So the fire service was built on post-1947 model, looking at the areas of Scotland where there was most need for stations and resources, which has obviously changed since the post-war period, and industry and everything else that goes around that. We could also look at changing duty patterns to make it more efficient, whilst ensuring 24/7 coverage and make it more attractive for recruiting people into the service. So this is the pre-consultation stage, as I say, and the survey itself is designed just to gather the opinions of the communities of Scotland in what they view as our priorities and how we shape the future of our service. The next steps following this from the 30th of June, we've got a team that will then collate the opinions and responses gathered and populate a number of options which will be generated from those returns. These options will then be circulated for formal consultation between December and February, end of this year, start of next year. And at the start of the next financial year, a final report will be made to the board of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service to allow planning to commence on any future changes that we decide. So that's it, convener. Thanks for giving us the time to go through that. And I would just ask that any questions, welcome to take them, but encourage you, more importantly, to share the consultation and put your views across and the views of your constituents across, because this is the opportunity to shape it the way that we think we need it for the future. Thank you.
I would reiterate that there is an online survey which you can complete. It takes about a quarter of an hour, I think. You can offer your comments. It can be anonymous if you want, and it's well worthwhile, and it'll form the future or form future opinion. So I would commend that to you all. Thank you, Commander. Have we any questions? Councillor McSween.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation there. Just on consultations, I know that as a crofter, as a Gaelic speaker, I get invited to a different consultation every week. Got another agriculture one today. When you were talking about attending places that have high footfall, I'm just aware that at this time of year we're going to have gala days and that kind of stuff in lots of communities throughout the Western Isles. Is that somewhere where you could go and proactively get a hold of people, raise awareness, and get people to take part in consultation that way, rather than expecting people to go online or something and do it that way?
Thanks, Councillor McSween. Absolutely. This is not about just going out into the urban areas and promoting the consultation and promoting the change, because as we know, predominantly in the rural areas of Scotland, which covers the majority of Scotland, there's things that we can do differently and groups that we can work with out there to make changes across the service. So your young farmers groups and your crofters and the rural communities and gala days are absolutely an ideal place for us to go and speak to our local communities. At the moment, we've got a couple of pop-ups that we've done. We did one in the local co-op just last week, I think it was. Group Commander Campbell might come in and add to this in a minute, and also it was quite innovative in the service of I think they're wanting to post it all over the media, but we did manage to do pop-ups on the ferry. We've got an agreement with Calmac you've got a captive audience, so speaking to people while they're crossing over and speaking to them there. But certainly, if there's anything that we can get the local crews out to in the local communities to deliver and put a stall up and just talk about it, then absolutely keen to be involved and do that. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, as the area commander touched on, we've done 4 pop-ups now in the area, or 5 pop-ups in the area. So the co-ops had 3 opportunities for us to be there, and we've had quite a good response from the 3 times we've approached the co-op and done it in there. Calmac was a mixed response. The first one was a flat calm sailing, which suited me. The second time was slightly bumpier, which meant I had to take up a bit of a defensive role. So I had to pack up my stuff and not participate any longer. But it was certainly it was a good way of capturing people, because it is an audience that they can't escape us. So it was quite good. I could actually engage for a long period of time. The slight downside we did find on that was there's obviously no connection. So to try to get somebody to do it online, as the councillor touched on, is difficult, and it depends on the demographic that we're dealing with, whether we can get the QR code to work, etc. Yeah. But we do provide people with a written option on a questionnaire that we send back in for them as well. So we are trying to cover all different areas and capture the whole age demographic as well.
Thank you. Councillor McSween, the survey, the online survey closes on the 30th of June. So it's probably before a lot of the rural
Okay.
shows.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Do the committee agree to note that presentation from? Yeah, thank you. I'll now invite Linda Cunningham will speak to the report and answer any questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing substantive to add at this point to the report, apart from that there'll be a full public consultation later on in the year into the beginning of next year, which Area Commander Scott Gibson already alluded to, once the change options have been fully developed and the public can have a further engagement then at the full public consultation. Thanks. Happy to take any questions.
Do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Yep. We go to item 6 now. The Consumer and Environmental Services Plan 2024-25 and the report by the Deputy Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that comes up every year. It just outlines the plan for the consumer environmental services for the year 24-25. The report itself is, or the plan itself is quite detailed. It covers all the activities that the services cover in a bit of detail with a lot of information. So it also outlines the kind of main priorities for the services over the year coming up. Most of the details in the report. The main priorities are basically trying to get everything back up working after the cyber attack. There's quite a lot of systems that we kind of relied on, so we're still having to kind of do workarounds, etc., to get everything and back up to speed. But we're mostly there. It's just to kind of tidy it up. So just want to highlight that there is an error in the report. It refers to the corporate plan, the corporate strategy of 22-27. It should refer to the new corporate strategy 2024-27. Other than that, happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fraser. Are there any questions? Do members agree to approve the recommendation at 3.1? Thank you. Item 7, performance monitoring, and it's just asking for reports outstanding, of which there are none. So there are no reports outstanding. And on that note, I'll bring this meeting to a close. The next scheduled meeting of this committee will be on the 18th of September 2024. Thank you very much.